This was found on a corrupted hard drive belonging to Michael Weaver, investigative journalist for the Millbrook Herald. Weaver has been missing for 6 months. Day 1. I've always been drawn to abandoned places. There's something about the whispered stories trapped in decaying walls that calls to me. A professional hazard of being a journalist, I suppose. But Holloway's Toy Emporium is different. Standing before its weathered facade today, I felt something I rarely experience. Hesitation. The assignment seemed simple enough. The local Historic Preservation Society is battling the town council over the proposed demolition of the building. My editor wants a human interest piece, something to make readers care about an old, forgotten toy store. Dig into its history, she said. Find the heart of the place. If only she knew what beats inside those walls. The first thing you notice about Holloway's is the silence. Most abandoned buildings breathe. They creak and settle, whispering to themselves. But Holloway's feels like it's holding its breath, waiting. The faded sign still hangs above the door, the once bright lettering now peeling away to reveal the wood beneath. I tried the door, locked, of course, but pressed my face against the grimy window instead. I could make out shapes in the darkness, shelves, a counter, the vague outlines of what must be toys, though it was too dark to distinguish their forms clearly. But there was something else, something that made my skin prickle. A tall figure stood in the back of the store, pale and unmoving. I told myself it was a mannequin, maybe a display stand, but as I turned to leave, I caught a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision. When I looked back, the figure was gone. I spent the rest of the day in the town archives, combing through yellowed newspapers and property records. Thomas Holloway opened the store in 1952. The photographs from the grand opening show a handsome man with kind eyes and skillful hands, demonstrating a mechanical bird to a crowd of awestruck children. The Millbrook Gazette called him a magician of toys, bringing dreams to life through wood and wire. I found several advertisements for the store spanning decades. In the early ones, Thomas appeared with his wife, Eleanor, both beaming with pride. In the later ads, Thomas appeared alone, his smile never quite reaching his eyes, never quite the same. The final advertisement I found, dated just weeks before the store's closure in 1981, shows Thomas looking gaunt and hollow-eyed, standing beside a life-sized mechanical ballerina. The caption reads, "Holloway's masterpiece invites you to dance." Something about the ballerina unsettles me. Perhaps it's the way her painted eyes seem to follow the camera, or how her frozen smile appears more like a grimace. I photocopied the image and pinned it to my notes. As I was leaving the archives, the elderly librarian touched my arm. "Writing about Holloway's, are you?" When I nodded, she pressed her lips together, considering something. "You should talk to Marie Simmons. She worked there as a girl. If anyone knows what really happened in that place, it's her." I asked what she meant by "really happened," but she just shook her head. "Some stories are best heard firsthand." Night has fallen now, and my hotel room offers a clear view of Holloway's. From here, the building is just a dark shape against the night sky, but I swear I saw a light moving inside earlier. Just a quick flash, there and gone. Probably kids with flashlights daring each other to break in. But if that's true, why haven't they come out yet? Day 2. I met Marie Simmons today. Finding her wasn't easy. She's not listed in any phone book, and several locals claim not to know her at all, despite the town's small size. It was the barista at a local coffee shop who finally pointed me in the right direction, though not without warning me that Ms. Simmons doesn't like to talk about that place. She was right. When I knocked on the door of the small blue house at the edge of town, the woman who answered regarded me with immediate suspicion. Age had bent her frame, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that time hadn't dulled. When I mentioned I was writing about Holloways, she tried to close the door. I wedged my foot in the gap, not my proudest moment as a journalist, and asked if she worked there as a teenager. The fight seemed to drain out of her. "You'd better come in," she said, "before they see you." Her living room was cluttered but clean, every surface covered with small porcelain figurines, animals, people, mythical creatures, all facing outward as if standing guard. I commented on the collection and she gave me a thin smile. "I like things that stay where I put them." Marie worked at Holloway's from 1976 to 1978, during what she called the change. According to her, Thomas Holloway wasn't just a toy maker. He was an artist, a genius with mechanisms and movements. He could make a bird from wood and wire that would sing so sweetly you'd swear it had a soul, she said, and maybe that was the problem. The trouble began, she claimed, after Eleanor's death. She had a heart attack, they said, but the night before, I heard them arguing in his wood shop. Eleanor was screaming about what you've done, and they're not right. When I saw her the next morning, she looked terrified. She made me promise never to stay in the store after dark. The next day, she was dead. After Eleanor's death, Thomas became obsessed with creating his masterpiece, the ballerina. He'd lock himself in his workshop for days. We could hear him talking to someone in there, like he was taking instructions. Marie's hands trembled as she spoke. When he finally unveiled her, something was wrong with her face. It wasn't just wood and paint, it looked alive, like something was looking out through her eyes. Marie quit shortly after the ballerina appeared, but not before witnessing things that still haunt her. The toys moved when no one was watching, not like they were falling, like they were shifting position deliberately, and they made sounds at night, not mechanical sounds, whispers, laughter, sometimes crying. I asked about the children who went missing. 3 local kids in the spring of 1981, the last ones seen entering Holloway's. Marie's expression closed off. "I don't talk about those poor children, but I'll tell you this, they took Thomas too, in the end. Whatever got into that store, whatever he let in, it was hungry." As I was leaving, Marie grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't go inside that place," she whispered, "and whatever you do, don't look the ballerina in the eyes." I assured her I'd be careful, but as I turned to go, she pressed something into my hand, a small wooden figurine of a bird. "Keep this with you," she said. "Thomas made it in the good days, before it might remember." The figurine sits on my hotel desk now, intricately carved, its wings outstretched as if preparing for flight. Occasionally, I could swear it shifts position when I'm not looking directly at it. Just my imagination, surely. Tonight, I drove past Holloway's again. The street was empty, the neighboring buildings dark, but Holloway's seemed different, less abandoned somehow. In one of the upper windows, I thought I saw a face watching me, not an adult's face, a child's. I didn't sleep well. Day 3. I've made a terrible mistake. This morning, I visited the town hall to look at the demolition permits and inspection reports. The clerk seemed nervous when I mentioned Holloway's, but he retrieved the files without comment. The most recent inspection, conducted just 3 months ago, noted several structural issues: rotting supports, water damage, mold, standard findings for a building neglected for decades. But tucked between routine reports was a single sheet of paper that chilled my blood. It was a handwritten note from the lead inspector, dated the day after the inspection. I quit. Find someone else to go back there. What we saw wasn't natural. The toys were watching us, and that ballerina, God help me, I saw her move. The note was signed by James Mercer, and a quick search on my phone revealed that Mercer died 2 weeks after the inspection. A single car accident on the highway outside of town. The newspaper described it as a tragic mishap, but noted that no skid marks were found at the scene, as if he'd deliberately driven into the concrete barrier. I needed to see inside Holloway's properly, not through the grimy windows, but actually inside. The demolition was scheduled for next week. Whatever secrets the building held would soon be buried under rubble. Breaking in wasn't difficult. The back door's lock was old, and years of exposure had weakened the wood around it. One solid push with my shoulder, and I was in. The smell hit me first, dust and mildew, but underneath that, something sweeter, like old candy or perfume. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, the shapes of the room materialized. Glass display cases covered with film and grime, shelves lined with toys frozen in eternal display, wooden animals, jointed dolls, miniature carousels, all remarkably intact despite decades of abandonment. Some still bore price tags, faded yellow squares with handwritten numbers. I moved deeper into the store, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight. My flashlight beam caught a small mechanical monkey, its brass cymbals poised to clash. Next to it, a wind-up soldier stood at attention, its painted face unnervingly realistic. I could almost imagine them performing their mechanical dance if wound, despite the years of neglect. That's when I noticed the stillness, not just quiet, a complete absence of sound. Even the ambient noise from the streets outside had vanished, as if the store existed in a pocket, separate from the rest of the world. The air felt thick, resistant, like moving through invisible cobwebs. At the back of the main room, a door stood ajar. Thomas Holloway's workshop, I presumed. I pushed it open slowly, wincing at the low groan of the hinges. The room beyond was larger than expected, with workbenches along the walls and tools hung in precise arrangements. Shelves held blocks of wood in various stages of transformation, some rough-hewn, others carved into delicate shapes awaiting assembly. In the center of the room stood the ballerina. She was just as the photographs had shown, life-sized with a white tutu and pale painted face. But the images hadn't captured the uncanny quality of her features. The way her glass eyes caught and reflected my flashlight beam with an almost organic gleam. Her posture was one of perfect poise, arms extended in mid-pirouette, one foot pointed forward as if about to leap out of her frozen state. I approached cautiously, drawn by the craftsmanship. Up close, I could see the fine details of her construction, the individual feathers of her tutu, the delicate veins painted on her slender wrists, the almost imperceptible seams where the wooden pieces joined. Her face was beautiful in a haunting way, with high cheekbones and lips parted slightly, as if about to speak. Against my better judgment, despite Marie's warning, I looked into her eyes. Nothing happened at first, just glass and paint, reflecting my own wary expression. But as I started to turn away, I caught a flicker of movement. Not from the ballerina herself, but within the reflection in her eyes, a shape moving behind me. I spun around. The workshop was empty save for the dusty tools and abandoned projects. But as I turned back to the ballerina, I realized something had changed. Her head, which had been tilted slightly to the right, was now facing straight forward, directly at me. I told myself it was a trick of the light, or that I had misremembered her initial position. But deep down, I knew in those few seconds when my back was turned, she had moved. My heart hammering against my ribs, I backed away. As I did, my elbow knocked against something on the wood bench, a small music box, intricately carved with figures of playing children. It tumbled to the floor, the impact triggering its mechanism. A tinkling melody filled the room, discordant and warped by age, but still recognizable. Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. The ballerina remained motionless, but the atmosphere in the room changed. The air seemed to vibrate with tension, like a moment before a thunderclap, and then, from the main room of the store came a sound that turned my blood to ice. The soft patter of footsteps, too light to be an adult, moving across the floorboards. I fled. I didn't stop to investigate the sound, didn't pause to gather my notes or equipment. I ran through the store, past the shelves where toys now seemed to watch my retreat with gleaming eyes, and burst through the back door into the blinding afternoon sunlight. Only when I was safely in my car, doors locked and engine running, did I realize I was clutching something in my hand. The wooden bird Marie had given me. I don't remember picking it up again after placing it on my desk, but somehow it found its way back to me. Even more disturbing when I checked my phone to find it was nearly 7 p.m. I'd entered Holloway's shortly after noon. 5 hours had vanished, unaccounted for in my memory. Tonight, I sit in my hotel room, trying to piece together what happened in those missing hours. The wooden bird sits before me, its carved eyes seeming to follow my movements. Twice now I've caught myself humming Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy, though I don't recall ever learning the tune. And when I close my eyes, I see the ballerina's face, her painted smile widening by imperceptible degrees. Day 4. The dreams began last night. I was back at Holloway's, but it wasn't abandoned anymore. The lights blazed from every window, the shelves gleamed with new toys, and children packed the aisles, their faces alight with wonder. Thomas Holloway moved among them, demonstrating a mechanical elephant that trumpeted and swayed its trunk. He looked younger and happier than in the later photographs, and beside him stood a woman I recognized as Eleanor, her hand resting protectively on his arm. As I watched, the scene shifted. The children remained, but the store darkened. The toys on the shelves changed, their painted smiles growing wider, sharper. Thomas worked feverishly at a wooden figure, but it wasn't a toy, it was the ballerina, taking shape beneath his hands. But something was wrong with the process. He wasn't carving the wood, he was binding something to it, something that writhed and resisted. Eleanor appeared, her face twisted with horror as she saw what her husband was creating. They argued, their voices distorted in the dream, but one phrase cut through clearly. Eleanor shouting, "You've invited them in! They'll never let us go now!" The dream shifted again. The store was as I had seen it yesterday, abandoned and dust-covered. But I wasn't alone. Children moved through the shadows, their forms translucent, their eyes hollow pools of darkness. They played with the toys, but the play was wrong somehow, mechanical, repetitive, like actors performing roles they'd long grown tired of. And in the center of it all stood the ballerina, no longer wooden, but flesh and blood, dancing a perpetual pirouette. As she spun, I saw her face change, cycling through different features, a young woman, then Eleanor, then the missing children, and then Thomas himself, each visage twisted in an expression of agony. The ballerina stopped suddenly, facing me. Her mouth opened, too wide, impossibly wide, and from it poured a stream of tiny wooden figures. As they clattered to the floor, they began to twitch and assemble themselves into a new shape, a new toy, a wooden bird with outstretched wings. I woke, clutching the wooden bird Marie had given me, my knuckles white with strain. The figurine felt warm to the touch, as if it had been held in someone else's hand moments before. Today, I tried to focus on writing, on assembling my notes into a coherent article, but the words would not come. Instead, I found myself sketching the ballerina over and over, each drawing more detailed than the last, though I'd only seen her briefly. By noon, I'd filled 5 pages with her likeness. Desperate for distraction, I drove to the county records office to research the building itself. What I found turned my unease to dread. Before becoming Holloway's toy emporium, the site had indeed housed the Millbrook Children's Home, an orphanage that burned to the ground in 1934, killing 17 children and 3 staff members. The fire was ruled accidental, but I found a disturbing detail in the inquest records. The blaze apparently started in a locked room where damaged toys were stored for repair. But the true horror came when I cross-referenced the names of the orphanage victims with the town records. Among them was a 7-year-old girl named Eleanor Bishop, the same Eleanor who would later become Thomas Holloway's wife, which was impossible, of course. Eleanor Holloway was born in 1925, according to her death certificate. She would have been 9 when the orphanage burned. She couldn't have died in the fire. Unless the woman who married Thomas Holloway wasn't Eleanor Bishop at all. I left the records office with more questions than answers, my head pounding with implications. As I drove back toward my hotel, an irresistible impulse took hold of me. I found myself turning down the street that led to Holloway's. It was nearly dusk when I parked across from the abandoned store. The fading light cast long shadows across its facade, making the boarded windows look like closed eyes. I sat in my car, telling myself I was just observing, gathering atmosphere from my article, but deep down, I knew I was waiting for something. As darkness fell, the streetlights flickered on, all except the one directly in front of Holloway's, which remained dark, creating a pool of shadow around the building, and in that growing darkness, I saw it. A soft glow emanating from within the store, visible through the cracks in the boarded windows, not the harsh beam of a flashlight, but the warm, gentle light of old-fashioned lamps. Against all reason, against every instinct for self-preservation, I got out of my car. The street was deserted, the neighboring buildings dark and silent, as if the entire block held its breath. The wooden bird was heavy in my pocket as I crossed the street, drawn towards Holloway's like a moth to a flame. The back door was still unlocked from my previous entry. It swung open at my touch, inviting me in. The interior was transformed. Though still showing signs of age and abandonment, the store was illuminated by a diffuse, golden light that seemed to have no specific source. The toys on the shelves gleamed as if newly polished, their colors bright, their forms more distinct. And there was sound, a music box playing somewhere in the depths of the store, its melody hauntingly familiar. I followed it, moving past displays that seemed more alive than before. A carousel of miniature horses appeared to turn slowly, though no mechanism drove it. A row of porcelain dolls tracked my movement with painted eyes. The workshop door stood wide open, the music box's song pouring through. Inside, the ballerina waited, but she wasn't alone. Arranged in a semicircle before her were 17 small wooden figures, children, their features carved with unsettling accuracy. Each held a toy, a ball, a doll, a tiny sailboat. The ballerina herself had changed. Her painted face now bore an expression of hungry anticipation, her arms outstretched not in a dance but in welcome. The music box sat at her feet, playing its tune without being wound. As I watched, frozen in the doorway, the wooden children began to move, not with the jerky motion of mechanical toys, but with a fluid grace of living things. They turned as one to face me, their carved eyes somehow seeing, and they spoke. A chorus of whispered voices that seemed to bypass my ears and echo directly in my mind. "Have you come to play with us? We've been so lonely." I should have run. I should have fled the place and never looked back. But something held me there. Curiosity, perhaps, or the journalist's insatiable need to uncover the truth. Or maybe it was something else, something that had taken root in the moment I first looked into the ballerina's eyes. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the music box's chiming notes. The wooden children giggled, the sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "We are what he made us," they said in unison, "what he bound to wood and wire. What he promised could play forever." "Thomas Holloway?" I whispered. The ballerina's head tilted, a movement so slight I might have imagined it. "He gave us form," the voices continued, "but we were here before, in the fire, in the screams, in the dreams that died with us." Understanding bloomed like ice in my veins. The orphanage children. The wooden figures nodded, a synchronized motion that sent shivers down my spine. "We were alone, forgotten, until he heard our whispers, until he gave us toys again." "And Eleanor?" I asked, though I feared the answer. The ballerina's lips seemed to curve upward, her painted smile widening by subtle but impossible degrees. "Eleanor was the first to wear my skin," the voices whispered, but now they came from the ballerina itself. "The first to dance for him. But we grew tired. She wanted to leave us. No one leaves." The music box's tempo increased. Its once sweet melody turned frantic, discordant. The wooden children began to sway, a rhythmic motion that mimicked dance but felt wrong and unnatural. "The others came later," they continued. "Children who wandered in, curious about the toys. Thomas tried to save them, to send them away, but we were hungry for new playmates, new skins to wear." "And Thomas?" My mouth was dry, my heart hammering so loudly I could barely hear my own words. "Thomas understood too late what he had invited in. He tried to break us, to dismember what he had assembled." The ballerina's arms lowered slightly, reaching toward me. "But we already had changed the rules of the game. We showed him how it feels to be the toy instead of the maker." The wooden bird in my pocket had grown hot, almost burning against my thigh. I pulled it out, half expecting it to come alive like the figures before me. It remained still, but a tremor ran through the assembled wood children at the sight of it. "He made that one differently," they hissed, their voices laced with what sounded like fear. "To warn, to watch, to guard." The ballerina's expression changed, the wood of her face rippling like liquid. "Give it to us," she commanded, her voice suddenly singular, deeper, resonant with malice. "Join our game instead." I clutched the bird tighter, its heat searing my palm. "What game?" I asked, stalling for time, edging back toward the door. The ballerina's smile stretched impossibly wide, splitting her wooden face. "The game never ends. We play at being alive. We dance with whoever enters. And when they tire, they become the toys, and we wear their skins for a while." Behind her, the wall of the workshop rippled and bulged, the wood grain flowing like water. Forms began to take shape in the undulating surface, faces pressing outward, mouths open in silent screams. I recognized Thomas Holloway's features, contorted in agony, and beside him, others, children, adults, the missing inspection team members. "You've seen too much now," the ballerina said, taking a step forward. The motion was fluid and alive, no longer a wooden toy, but something wearing the semblance of one. "But you brought us a gift, a voice to tell our story, to invite others to play." With horrible clarity, I understood what she meant. My article, my investigation. I was doing exactly what they wanted, spreading their story, ensuring Holloway's would capture attention once more, drawing new visitors, new curious souls to feed whatever hungry thing lived within these walls. The wooden children were moving toward me now, their carved limbs jerking in a grotesque parody of a childhood game. The music box played faster, more frantically, and behind them all, the ballerina began to dance, her movements hypnotic and enticing. "Dance with me," she crooned, her voice a blend of many others. "Wear my skin for a while. Feel how it is to be both puppet and puppeteer." The wooden bird burned against my palm, and suddenly I understood its purpose. Marie's words echoed in my mind. It might remember. I raised the bird high, and the effect was immediate. The wooden children shrieked, a sound like splintering timber. The ballerina's dance faltered, her perfect features contorting with rage. Thomas carved this from the heart of the tree that grew over the orphanage's ruins, I said, the knowledge coming to me as if whispered directly into my mind. The same tree that fed on your ashes. It remembers what you truly are, not children, not toys, but hungry shadows playing at both. The ballerina lunged toward me, her wooden joints crackling with the unnatural movement, but the bird in my hand flared with heat and light, forcing her back. The wooden children scattered, retreating to the edges of the room. "You cannot leave," the ballerina hissed, her voice fractured now, splitting into many. "Once you've played with us, you belong to us." But I was already backing toward the door, the wooden bird extended before me like a ward. The music box's melody had changed again, becoming a funeral dirge. As I reached the threshold, the light of the workshop began to dim, the golden glow fading to a gray murk of true abandonment. The ballerina stood frozen once more, a wooden toy caught in mid-pirouette, but her painted eyes followed me, and her lips moved slightly, forming words I couldn't hear, but somehow understood. "We'll be waiting. The game isn't over." I fled through the darkened store past shelves of toys that now seemed to reach for me with jointed limbs, through the back door and into the night. Only when I reached my car did I realize I was bleeding, a long splinter embedded in my palm, driven deep by the heat of the wooden bird, which had returned now to room temperature. Tonight, I sit in my hotel room, writing this account while the events are still fresh in my mind. Tomorrow, I'll leave Millbrook. I've told my editor that the story doesn't have the human interest angle that she wanted. Just another derelict building with a sad history, not worth the column space. But the truth burns inside me, demanding to be recorded. So I write, even as my vision blurs with exhaustion, even as the splinter wound in my palm throbs with each keystroke. The wooden bird sits on the desk before me, silent guardian against what waits in the Holloway's toy emporium. I cannot destroy it, cannot leave it behind. It's bound to me now, as I'm bound to the story I've uncovered, and somewhere in the recess of my mind, a music box plays an endless waltz and wooden children whisper, "Come play with us. The toys are waiting." Epilogue, 3 months later. The following text was found scrawled in a journal next to the laptop containing the above account. The handwriting deteriorates significantly toward the end. The dreams won't stop. Every night I'm back in Holloway's, dancing with the ballerina. Her wooden face becomes mine. My skin hardens to polished maple. I wake, gasping, certain that I cannot bend my joints, that my blood has turned to varnish. The wooden bird is changing. Its wings, once outstretched, have folded close to its body. Its head has turned, degree by imperceptible degree, until it now faces the wall instead of watching over me. Some mornings I find it in different places than where I left it. On my pillow, in my shoe, once floating in my coffee cup. Last week I received a package, no return address, postmarked from Millbrook. Inside was a small music box, intricately carved with figures of playing children. I didn't wind it, didn't open it. I threw it in a dumpster 10 blocks from my apartment. The next morning, it was on my kitchen table. The splinter in my palm has not healed. The wound has darkened, the skin around it taking on a glossy, wooden appearance. When I press it, I don't feel pain. I hear laughter, distant laughter, and children playing. Yesterday, I caught my reflection changing in the mirror. Just for an instant, my features replaced by a painted smile and glass eyes. Last night, I woke to find myself standing before that same mirror, arms outstretched in a classical ballet pose I've never learned. I'm going back to Millbrook today, back to Holloway's. The demolition never happened. A series of equipment malfunctions, permit issues, and unexplained accidents have delayed it indefinitely. The ballerina is waiting. The game continues. If you're reading this, if you've found my account, heed my warning. Stay away from the abandoned places where children once laughed. Stay away from forgotten toys that remember too much. And if you ever see a life-size ballerina with a painted smile and hungry eyes, don't look into her gaze. Don't look. Don't. The text ends here. Michael Weaver's whereabouts remain unknown. The demolition of Holloway's Toy Emporium is scheduled for next month. Workers reported hearing music from within the building at night, and one claims to have seen a tall, thin figure dancing behind the boarded windows. The wooden bird mentioned in the Weaver's account was never found. Thanks for listening to another of my Dark Veil tales. If you enjoyed the story and want to hear more, be sure to click the story linked here or others in my video section. And if you're so inclined, like or subscribe to my channel. It will definitely be appreciated. Have a frightfully fantastic day.